To me, this is not just another nation. It is not just one of the family of nations. This is a nation with a great mission to perform for the benefit of liberty-loving people everywhere.
That we shall be as a city upon a hill.
These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country.
You've come to fight as free men. Free men you are. What will you do without freedom?
Proclaim liberty throughout all the land.
In one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. You gotta fight for your right. Can you dig it?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Get it right or pay the price. It's 8:08 in the Central Time, meaning it's 9:08 on the Eastern Time. This is a very special evening edition of Real News. We got the background going again. We're up to speed. We got the HD camera in the front. We got the microphone quality. Mr. Henry is live back in the studio in the Nashville area, just a little bit south of the Nashville area. But we're doing it at the evening time. Our boy Zig's still out there in Georgia. Shine's going to be out there in Georgia in just a few days from now. Georgia thing is still going on. It's still a race. It's still something we have to pay attention to. And believe it or not, it comprises the latter half of this show this evening. This show's title, as you'll see right now, I'm going to say it multiple times, When Law and Morality Contradict. When Law and Morality Contradict. Bastiat's going to fill in the rest for you here in just a minute. Before we go to Shine and introduce him, let's kick it to our boy Zig. Zig, how you doing, buddy? How's Georgia still treating you? The hotel... Well, those drapes look as terrible as they did last time, man. But how's it going, buddy?
Things aren't getting any better in that regard. But in terms of knowledge, we are getting more wise by the day. I just led something of a long discussion about independent contractors and the threat the current executive poses to independent contractors. Basically, what the current president would support would be something that would probably either make it very difficult to become an independent contractor or get rid of it in hopes that they become union workers or they become employees. So we have to have more government. So fighting that fight, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Man, that's some serious topics here. Wait, who did you have this conversation with, you said?
Oh, this was just with some of the best activists that we had at Americans for Prosperity in Pennsylvania. But yeah, had that conversation, something that we're going to be working on network-wide. If you're afraid of the California bill, AB 5, that was passed, it did a lot of damage to Uber and Lyft drivers. You should be very concerned about this incoming administration and really be ready to take action now to defend our independent contractors and to defend our economic freedom.
Man, you said you had this with one of your best activists down there. That's a high-level conversation. It's one of my favorite things about working with activists over the last couple of months here. I think Malin, one of David's fantastic activists in the Knoxville area that came down and did a whole bunch of knocking with us last week. I think she's coming out this week as well with David when he's going down there. When Shine's going down there. She was just awesome to be around and hang around because she would just tell us all the time that it's really cool for her to be a part of a political family and just be around like political heads, political elites. Like, you know, the people that are like really into something, like people are really into the sneaker collecting or something. I don't know what the analogy is, but all we do is politics, man. All we do is talk politics. We live, sleep, eat, breathe this stuff. It's just, it's interesting to be around those like-minded people that you can have those kind of high caliber conversations with. Speaking of Shine, let's go to him, see how he's doing before Greatest Audience in the Nation appreciation segment. And we got a big one coming up here, so stick around for that. But Shine, how's stuff going on your end, man? Mm. Mm. Hey, and as we're doing real news, fake news here real quick, Shine, go ahead and be getting ready that very first article. There's not a lot in the show notes this evening because we're going to be sticking on one topic pretty heavy. That's going to be this underlying motif, the overarching theme. I don't care what term you use, but it's when law and morality contradict. That is going to take us through a situation in California, a quick little address, not quick, but an address by Walter Williams. What's going on in Pennsylvania with the governor shutting down some gun rights, and then on into the situation, the continuing situation in Georgia. But that first video shot into the national story section. It's a Twitter link. If you go ahead and pull that up as we're talking about real news, fake news. Real news, fake news for this evening. You'll see it on your screen right now if you're watching on Facebook. Bottom of the screen right here. You tell me if this headline is a real headline or a fake headline, in the sense of, are they actually trying to prove this point? Is it a legitimate article, legitimate publication, or something with satire? Did I just make this off the top of my head? Is it real or fake? Here's the headline. Politicians breaking own rules can now purchase hypocrisy credits. Politicians breaking own rules can now purchase hypocrisy credits. You tell me if that's real or fake. And as we lead into the introductory video for this evening, there's this terribly tragic story going on in California. And honestly, I think that could just be the story by itself. Just that simple statement. That there's a terribly tragic story going on in California. And I don't care what you say. I don't care if it's shutting down some automotive center because you're not required as essential service. Maybe you are essential service, maybe you're not, but restaurants certainly aren't. How many hundreds of restaurants? How many thousands? How many tens of thousands of restaurants? Maybe we're in the hundreds of thousands. I don't know.
700,000 just in the state of New York.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, there you go, right? I mean, that's what we're looking at right now. We're talking about breaking an industry where businesses could possibly never come back from. And that would all be okay, I suppose, if there was some type of consensus going on. That would make it a little bit more palatable if you could at least trust your politicians. I'm going to use tonight, we're going to start with some stuff with Bastiat here in just a little bit after you get the video that sets the stage. I'm going to try and prove the point here that this has been a slow crawl, a creep into where we are. That this really isn't anything all that new. And what I mean by that is the powers that are being used currently were set well before COVID. We have been slowly creeping into authoritarianism and the ever-loving bosom of statism for a very, very long time. I think COVID shutdowns are merely a symptom of that crawl. It's just exposing the underlying rot. Now here, Shine, play that video. If you can, make it full screen. If not, it doesn't really matter. But listen, man, this is going on in California right now. We'll play from beginning to end. Just listen to this lady's story. Here we go.
So this is my place, the Pineapple Hill Grill and Saloon. If you go to my page, you can see all the work I did for outdoor dining, for tables being 7 feet apart. And I come in today because I'm organizing a protest, and I came in to get stuff for that. And I walk into my parking lot, and obviously Mayor Garcetti has approved this. Has approved this being set up for a movie company. I'm losing everything. Everything I own is being taken away from me. And they set up a movie company right next to my outdoor patio, which is right over here. And people wonder why I'm protesting and why I have had enough. They have not given us money and they have shut us down. We cannot survive. My staff cannot survive. Look at this. Tell me that this is dangerous, but right next to me as a slap in my face, that's safe. This is safe. 50 feet away. This is dangerous. Mayor Garcetti and Gavin Newsom is responsible for every single person that doesn't have unemployment, that does not have a job, and all the businesses that are going under. And we need your help. We need somebody to do something about this.
The tones in her voice deliver so much to me. It's the sense of desperation, the feeling of helplessness, that anger, angst, just confusion, the literal utter hypocrisy just standing right in front of her. All of these emotions. If I don't know how you term all these emotions into one simple term, but the breaking in her voice is what was expressed to me in that. Now, support is pouring in from across Los Angeles for this restaurant owner whose frustrated and tearful complaint about unfairness of COVID restrictions has gone viral with nearly 8 million clicks. Now, this was a couple days ago. Now, her tables have been ordered to shut down under California's ban on outdoor dining or indoor dining, obviously. The only thing she can do now is possibly some curbside stuff. Meanwhile, the film catering site that she showed you across the street is feeding the cast and crew of NBC crime drama Good Girls. I don't know what the show is. Doesn't matter, but it's an NBC crime
Essential,
drama.
Grant. That's all you need to know. What is that called again? What's it called again?
It's Good Girls.
Good Girls.
NBC crime
Hey,
drama.
Good Girls is essential. Her restaurant, non-essential. Good Girls, essential.
Good Girls. They apparently received a city permit that's issued under the city permit license there. This is the New York Times reported on this. Now, this restaurant owner has owned this restaurant for over 10 years, and she just spent that little outdoor construction you saw with that little makeshift tent. I'm not trying to downplay it or disparage her or anything. It cost her $80,000 $80,000 to construct that little outdoor dining area. How many people could you sit up there? 20, 30 people at absolute max? Nearly $100,000 to outdoor that before the state ordered restaurants to go to takeout only last month. That was reported by an ABC affiliate in Los Angeles. Now, you heard her say they're not giving us any money. They've shut us down. We cannot survive. Now, okay, listen. Importantly, the distinction in classification of law that's going on here, or so the government has responded. This is a very key component. The government, one that is meant to be looking after the general welfare of its populace, of its citizens, meant to be doing something for the betterment of you and I, or Californians in general. The government, that sole responsibility should be there to maintain stability of society. That government's response is, well, listen, NBC staff over here, I mean, everybody working on the show, they have to get tested for COVID all the time. So it's not really the same situation or the same circumstances as just randos walking in off the street that would come to your restaurant. Okay. Well, fine. Is that supposed to make that much of a difference for this lady, though, when all she's able to see is across the street is the literal exact, it's not even like a virtual comparison, it's the exact same setup, 15 feet across from her. For her not to take that as some type of slight against her personally, I don't know. I don't know how else she would take that. And it goes to what Shine said a second ago. Essential businesses. What really is an essential business? Well, for the state of California now, because Newsom needs that ever lovely taxation money, Hollywood, I suppose, has become an essential business. We were just told all across the place that these, COVID cases are on the rise, that everybody needs to stay in. You can't go to work or whatever. Certainly not a restaurant, but they need that good Hollywood tax money, don't they? So now Hollywood and film crews have become essential business. And I go back one more time to saying, listen, government, even if you're going to somehow tell me that multiple tests of your people is going to somehow stymie off this transmission of COVID-19, bro, everybody within a 200-yard radius of the president was getting tested literally, without exaggeration, every 24 hours. That dude still got it. So what am I supposed to take of this right now? This is a harrowing story. It's a tragic story. But it leads me to one of the contention I want to make here in just a second. Zig, you were going to go in there. Go ahead, buddy. What were you going to say?
The problem here is something that I alluded to before, in that we now live in a first world nation that has ample wealth and ample money, and yet we still have this theory of the executive where what counts as an emergency is very loose, and that allows the executive branch to make these decisions when it doesn't really make any sense anymore. I think behind the news is actual philosophical theory. And when you look at that theory, it says that executives can suspend the law in times of emergency. Well, the problem is, philosophically, nobody defined what an emergency is. We still don't have a good criterion by which we can make that measurement or make that assessment. I would argue that even with COVID-19, that wouldn't necessarily count as an emergency, because that's not a war. That's not a war, and yet you have governors repeating, "Oh, we're at war with the virus." No, we're not. You're just using that rhetoric to justify your suspension of the state legislator and everybody's right to property. And that's the problem.
In stating that Zig is hitting this directly on the head, before I go to my contention for this evening, and before I really let y'all know why we've all entitled this program this evening, When Law and Morality Contradict, Bastiat's going to fill in the rest for us. Let me hit some Facebook comments here. Eric said, yeah, and we're losing faith in the people we elect. That's not good. Yeah, exactly. That's the point. The point is not just losing faith in the people, but we're losing faith in the entire institution. And I think government has done it to us. Dwayne said, when did filming become essential, right? See, that is a question. It is the question. You can't feed yourself, but you can film someone else feeding themselves.
When did we start deciding what was essential and non-essential? Even more bare bones than that. When did we start deciding as a society or culture at any time, anywhere in any geographical area, let alone the whole country, that some people are allowed to leave their house and other people aren't? Some people are allowed to work, some people aren't. That's new.
Also, under communism, no business is essential because all that competes with the government. That's why the distinction was made in the first place. In a society that focuses on liberty in a republic, all business would be considered essential because the focal point would be the right to own property. John Locke said life, liberty, property. He didn't say this corny pursuit of happiness that Jefferson later added in there. He said property. And that's the cornerstone for anybody who supports liberty and capitalism and our republic. All business is essential, but because we live in communism or half communism or quasi-socialism, that's why that distinction was introduced.
Jonathan said the solutions we have are elections and war, and we as a society chose elections over war. Eric said, just like Nashville, construction projects are essential, even though the new businesses can't use the building unless they're on the inside. Insanity. Kelly just said in Facebook, the people are making their own choices to risk their very lives to go out to eat. Maybe it's certain death as a side dish, but maybe it's not. All right. Now, Sean, as I'm giving my little pitch here, by the way, Michael said, I'm thinking that doctors no longer study the writings of, Hippocratic Oath and the reading of their hypocrisy. Yeah, you're right about that. Right. Sean, as I'm giving this next little pitch here, there's a couple video links under the national story section. As you'll see, there's a bunch of red italicized writing. That's this rant I'm about to go on in a second. But pull up that very first YouTube clip. It should be linked automatically to about 3 minutes and 18 seconds in a Walter E. Williams speech entitled The Decline of Morality in Society. Now, as Shine's pulling that up here, we're going to do about 3 or 4 minutes of this clip coming up here because it's going to really prove this point. And my contention going into this next clip, as Shine probably has it ready for us right here somewhere, is exactly what Zig just said a second ago. Our country's been slipping closer and closer towards authoritarianism or statism or whatever you want to call this. I don't care the term you use. We've been slipping closer and closer to that for quite some time. The hypocrisy and primarily the lack of common sense behind some of these COVID shutdown orders are merely a symptom of this crawl. I believe COVID did nothing more than just expose that rot. And hear me right now, even though COVID exposed what I'm calling the rot of a slow creep towards authoritarianism, I'm not even making the argument right now that the COVID restrictions are unnecessary or unwarranted. That is not my claim. I'm merely making the claim that our government has been training its citizens to have a distorted view of the law for several decades. Government has been training its own citizens to not trust government for several decades. I believe that systemic problems require long-term structural change, but more on that in another show. Let's start where we are currently, and let's prove the point here that we've been in a slow creep crawl up until this point, and COVID is doing nothing more than just using the previously established forms of power to get something across. Go ahead and hit play from 318 there, Sean.
Frederick Bastiat said, when law and morality contradict one another, the citizen has the cruel alternative of either losing his sense of morality or losing his respect for the law. We Americans are increasingly encountering Bastiat's cruel alternative. And let me spend just a few moments examining this phenomenon. Traditionally, the common law assumption was that if one behaved morally and used common sense, the reasonable person doctrine, some of his actions could possibly lead to civil penalties for accidents and mistakes, but not to criminal penalties. With the growth of the Leviathan state in our country, that has all changed. Under what lawyer James D. DeLong calls the new criminalization in our country, with its increased complexity and arbitrary provisions, no American can rely on his moral compass or common sense to steer him clear of criminal prosecution.
Pause right there.
For example, let me give you a few examples.
All right, we're going to continue on where we were. Look, we're going to piecemeal this. You understand what he's saying here, and I'm trying to catch myself up to speed here a little bit too. So I need comment section for Facebook. Zig Shine, help me with this stuff along the way.
Hey, I think it's cool that Kel Northup was like so plugged in. She knows that that he passed recently, and she says in the comments, "WW is going to be missed greatly. What a brilliant mind." And then some really cool emojis. I'm not really sure what they mean, but I'm sure it's something positive. But I think that's cool that Kel even knew who this was. Good for you, Kel.
Well, it's a major loss for the world, for conservatism. It's a major loss for Americans for Prosperity too. He was one of the founding board members of Americans for Prosperity. He's been on the board ever since the beginning of this company. I mean, it's he was
huge
a beacon
civil rights guy. Right? Great story. Look him up, Google him, Wikipedia him, whatever you got to do.
I had a criminal law professor. You can still find this. It's viral out there on the internet somewhere. His name was Professor Dwayne. He was a magna cum laude Harvard Law grad. He actually spoke faster than I did. Believe it or not, go check this guy out. The video is entitled "Why You Shouldn't Ever Talk to the Police." And in there, he goes through his basic opening presentation by saying, like, there are so many tens of thousands of laws in the books right now. You are probably breaking anywhere from 5 to 15 laws every single day without even realizing it. And when you criminalize something, when you criminalize just normal living to that extent, what I believe Walter is saying is you're undermining the morality indicator. You are undermining the ability for people to understand what is and is not moral, because what is and is not legal should at least follow in some line with what is and is not moral. But you're messing with people's psyche. Right? You're changing the way that they think about what common sense is, because a lot of these laws are not commonsensical, at least not to your average everyday citizen. It's illegal to own a short-tail lobster in Maine. It's illegal to eat ice cream cone upside down in Alabama. Now, whether or not anybody enforces these laws or not, who knows, bro? Who knows? But the more and more draconian, i.e. authoritarian, i.e. the closer you get towards statism, or in general, the more pressure government applies to your daily life, the more it perverts your sense of morality. Because you are no longer pulling your moral essence from where it should arguably be coming from. Either, religion or God or some community group or something outside of yourself, some version of collective consciousness, but it certainly shouldn't be coming from your government, at least not the baseline of it. And as we lose our ability to think about things in a commonsensical manner, because it is not in line with a common sense approach to life, that it should be illegal to own a short-tailed lobster in Maine. He's going to tell you about some other examples here in a second. And as you start to pervert this sense of morality for American citizens over time, you start to cause them to think like, all right, dude, goodness gracious, man. Like, so is everything they're telling me a lie? Like, is anything the government telling me to do right now, if is any version of what you all are criminalizing right now, fining me or putting me in jail for, is any of that for my betterment? Because it's starting to look like most of it is not. I'm starting to think that the majority of it is to fund some department, to skid some bureaucratic scheme. I don't know, man. I don't know, to further grow your aspirations, but very little of it looks like it's trying to help my daily life. So fast forward, now to 2020, we're stuck in a situation where those same citizens have been dealing with over-draconian laws and overreach by a police authoritarian state into every single aspect of their lives. And what are they supposed to do now? Just sit back and expect that this is different? And maybe it should be different. Hear what I'm saying? Maybe a pandemic should be the one time that it should be different. That government should be looking out for the betterment of its own citizens. Maybe it actually is. That's not even my point. My point is that we've been slow burning it up to this point for such a long time. We have a systemic problem, a lack of trust, not just in the law, but in our own votes now. Now, that's the end of the show, okay? That's the end of the show. Shine, if you can, pick up where we left off from that video.
An engineer in Maryland was contracted to do work on private property. He was imprisoned for polluting the navigable waters of the United States by merely dumping 2 truckloads of soil on dry land. A rancher was criminally prosecuted for clearing brush from old irrigation ditches. Another man was brought to before a grand jury for stabbing a falcon, whatever you want to call him, with a pitchfork that was killing one of his chickens. Another man was charged for shooting a bear in self-defense. In Newark, New Jersey, 500 people have been fined for putting aluminum cans in their trash. These and possibly thousands of other examples damage the societal sense of morality. That is, people who see themselves as responsible, law-abiding people begin to develop a contempt for the law. And when we lump what's trivial with what's barbaric as criminal activities, as we are increasingly doing in our country, it undermines our sense of moral priorities. As in the case of Newark, where 500 people have been fined for deliberately or inadvertently putting beer cans in their trash. That kind of says to people, well, it's more important to prosecute people for these kinds of activities than to prosecute all the thieves, murderers, and rapists in Newark, New Jersey. The growth of the Leviathan state is undermining our moral priorities, I believe.
Pause it right there, Sean.
Deficits and debt.
All right. So he goes on for a while to talk about deficits being, another thing that's undermining our morality. And yes, he's correct about that. We'll get on that in a second.
Well, and our prioritization, I'm sure, is what he's talking about. The deficits, It's like what's really important here.
Exactly. Right. Is it more important to prosecute someone for throwing a bunch of aluminum cans in their garbage can, or I don't know, possibly to do something legitimate with that time?
It must be, because it sounds like people like judges have free time when they're prosecuting people throwing cans in the trash cans. So there must not be a lot of murders. There must not be a lot of petty theft. There must not be a lot of violent crime in Newark, New Jersey. I'm sure that's the case.
And I started to think here for a while. You know how I come on this program all the time, and I preach this a lot. I don't know if anyone gets, it's broken recordish when I talk about this, but I always say this thing of like, I don't know, how many more people would be wearing masks or following some of these, what the government is forced to dictate to and mandate and throw all these edicts down right now through unelected health boards and everything, whether it's businesses requiring such and such or shutting down for a certain time or going to just curbside stuff. How much of that stuff would be happening organically? Or how many more people would be doing it naturally if the government didn't force them to? And I was struggling for a while to figure out the philosophy that not just fit that narrative, but actually helped to explain some of the motivation behind it. And I think this is getting dangerously close to it. Not fully there yet, but getting pretty darn close to it. Because what this guy is essentially saying is after a long enough period of time, if you equate your morality with your law, and the law itself starts to pervert the intention of behind your morality, well, goodness gracious, man, I can then not blame someone later on. When they start to say, well, if a government is telling me to do something, most of the time they get it wrong. So if they tell me to do it this time, my common sense, literally the human psyche behind what dictates common sense, yes, no, right, wrong, 1, 2, A, B, tells me that what they're telling me to do is probably not the best thing to do. At a minimum, it's not the thing that's going to be looking out for my best interests. And that, how we got here, didn't just happen yesterday. It didn't just happen in February. It didn't just happen when, I don't know, March, when we discovered the first case of COVID. Whatever that is, has been a very, very long time coming. And I know Zig wants to get in here in a second. And as we're setting up the next clip here, Shine, if you could, either in the show notes section, it's linked directly, or just fast forward this video to minute 18:56 seconds. So 18 minutes, 56 seconds. We'll play out the last 2 minutes of this little clip here from Walter. I think what Walter ends up going to explain here in just a second, and I know this is not where people want to be at right now, but he eventually makes the claim that, look, systemic problems require long-term structural change. Go ahead and play it from right here, Sean.
Enforcing rules like these that have no moral foundation and have the most trivial of benefits with increasing punitive measures undermines respect for and the perceived legitimacy of government. And as that happens, government attempts to coerce respect that it cannot earn. And because there are enforcement costs and the lack of resources, government has to exact draconian penalties for minor offenses in order to set examples as a means to get general compliance.
They hope they can be the case, by the way. They hope that they can deter because they don't have the resources. So if a deterrence doesn't work, there aren't a lot of options because you can't police everybody. But anyway, let me just throw that in there.
Now, the only hope that I have, things look pretty dismal. And matter of fact, if you are I think one has to recognize that the normal state of human affairs is for a person to be subject to arbitrary control and abuse by others. That's the normal state of human affairs, both historically and currently right now. And liberty, the kind of liberty that you and I have known in our country, is relatively rare in human history. It's not the normal state of affairs. I'm very sure that if a historian writing 300 years from now, he may very well say, well, look, we had this little historical curiosity called liberty, mostly in the Western world for a few years, but everything went back to the way that it always was. So I'm not all that optimistic about liberty, but the only hope that I have for the amputation of the heavy hand of government in our country is the 10th Amendment movement, the embryonic 10th Amendment movement going on in many parts of our country.
Now,
I've been writing a nationally syndicated...
I don't necessarily follow him all the way through the embryonic 10th Amendment movement of literally states seceding from the United States. That's neither here nor there. I do follow him to this much. I believe that the power that the federal government has right now is one that's systemic in nature and has need for structural change. I believe where we are currently right now with these COVID shutdowns is not, okay, they are happening at a state level, but I think that is symptomatic of some of the power that we've given up to federal courts and the overall idea behind the sense that we've had a change in mentality. We've had a philosophy switch. Quite literally, the way that we think about how the law applies to our life has been fundamentally shifted over the last couple of decades. I purposely...
Do you think what he means is the... I don't think what he means is secession. I think he's talking about there's a 10th Amendment movement to have another constitutional Congress where there's kind of like a more specific constitution or, you know what I'm saying, or something like that. But
Well, I just said that because right after that, he goes on to talk about a paper that he just finished writing, saying that he was calling for, at some point, maybe he's not calling for, he just thinks it's inevitability that like you cut through the Mississippi and that's what the future United States is going to look like, right? But what he's saying is basically to save ourselves from that, as much as we possibly can, we need to claw back power from political institutions and place it back into individuals. And I don't necessarily care what that looks like. I don't care if it's from a governor back to your local municipality, from the president back to the state. But I was just telling my wife right before we got on the show, I envision a future, say 2040. I don't know, whenever the next presidential election is after the year 2040, we get to the point, maybe ABC or some weird perverted affiliate of ABC by the year 2040 reports on the fact that President such and such has just won the Electoral College. He's going to be your next president. And across the United States, we all look at the TV and say, oh, that's nice. And then we go back to doing whatever we were just doing. Just like, it's just a thing, right? It's just a thing. Hey, and you respond by maybe saying like, I hope he doesn't get us into a war, okay? Because that's basically all that he should be responsible for doing. I envision a future where conservatives over the next 5 years will slowly start to claw back power from federal government, start claw back power from any version of government, and place it back into their own political lives. Now, I realize this is a very strange pitch for a political program and for individuals that work in politics to say, hey, get involved in politics to destroy politics. But what I'm really doing is ramping up self-responsibility. And most importantly, what I'm really doing is I believe in the next 4 years, there is going to be opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to present these disenfranchised Democrats with something more tangible, something real, and something honest for the first time in their political lives. These people have begun eating themselves. My father-in-law fled communism under Romania. I mean, I'm from Romania several decades ago. We were talking 2 or 3 months back, and he said something to the effect of me like, hey, this is just a version of a Marxist takeover in America. And you know what's going to happen in every other Marxist takeover. The first ones to go are the university professors. Now, when you see the university professors start to go, you know that something's going to be switching around. And I remember hearing a story on NPR just last week about in Berkeley, there's a contingency of professors that are trying to rise up against their own students. They think they need to have more power of freedom of speech in the classroom, that it's becoming too restrictive with conversation, that they can't even have a dialogue back and forth with anybody. And when the administration has to choose between its customers, i.e. the students, and their employees, I presume they would choose the customers. Lack of money, lack of funds means no employees anyway, so why wouldn't you go that way? The point I'm making is we're starting to see this switch now. As they start to eat themselves, they're going to reveal themselves for what the ideology and the philosophy truly is. And in that time period, in that window currently, right now, we as conservatives will have the opportunity to pitch these structural, systemic changes, the ones of offering like genuine hope and actual solutions. The ones where we can get to an individual and say like, hey, I believe in your self-autonomy. You can be charged. You are not a liability to be taken care of. We have an opportunity in the next couple of years here. I believe that all this stuff is going to be happening and that it's coming over. And I believe Walter Williams is backing me up on this. When he says he sees a 10th Amendment solution, he means decentralization of power, because in decentralization of political power means an expansion of individual power. You know what I'm saying? That, I believe, is the conservative pitch. We didn't lose the presidency. We gained an opportunity to pitch what we said we always believed in. From day one, we've said we believed in this pitch. Remove political power. Remove large institutions. Don't give it to the presidency. Give it back to the people. We are on the verge of a Rome moment like we never have been before, and I don't know who is going to take it back from the Senate and give it back to the people, but somebody needs to. Now, I've been rambling for a while, but you get what I'm saying, man. This is why I'm hyped. This is what I'm excited about. I think COVID situation is going on right now, but I think it's been a long, slow burn up until now. We're going to require structural changes, but I think in the next 4 years, we've been blessed with an awesome opportunity to do just that. Now, before I switch to some other topics here and give some updates as to what's going on in Georgia with our op-ed royale tonight, I don't know. Let me kick it around the round table. Zig, you make anything of this idea? Am I being way too... I don't know, man. Am I looking too out in the future here? Is this a little bit too optimistic? I'll hit some Facebook comments here in a minute as well, too. What do you think?
No, but to have people who want to take back power, you have to have people who view themselves as citizens first and not as people. For me personally, I view myself as a citizen and a spiritual resident of Rowlett, Pennsylvania, rural Pennsylvania, because that's where I'm from. That's where my grandfather came from. That's where he raised me when I didn't have a father, and no one else wanted to take responsibility for me and my life. So, but with that worldview, I now feel that I have an obligation and duty to not only make that place a better place, but make all other places like the kind of warm, welcoming place that I knew Rolette, Pennsylvania to be. But instead, you have many people who don't view themselves as citizens, but people. I am a collective person. I am no different than anybody else. We're all interchangeable. We're all pieces of a imperfect Democrat machine. That if we could just perfect the Democrat machine, we could all be happy. Well, that's not how it works. And when you have people who view themselves as people and not as citizens, then you have people who are disenchanted and disaffected, and they get violent and destroy things.
You know, I think that's yet one more place, though, where the conservative pitch can come in and help fill some gaps, man. I think there's three basic pitches, and this is not my take. I mean, I got what I'm about to say from Charles Koch's new book, honestly. But there's three basic pitches to how to motivate an individual, right? Adler said you motivate an individual by tapping into their desire for power, politicians in particular, right? Freud said you motivate an individual by tapping into their desire for pleasure, okay? So the guy, Viktor Frankl, who I tend to agree with, says that you motivate an individual by tapping into their desire to have meaning, to have purpose. Frankl was a guy who found this philosophy, or at least espoused this philosophy, while he was in the middle of a concentration camp. So he was sitting there stuck in the worst situation imaginable. And I do mean possibly the worst situation imaginable in human history, save from a few other genocide situations and subjugated races. And he thought to himself, well, I clearly can't be motivated by power. Okay. Now Adler might have come from before or after, whatever. But it is just the three ways you can do it. He clearly couldn't have been motivated by power, and he clearly couldn't have been motivated by pleasure. It's the only thing he had left to find purpose and meaning in life was to be motivated to respond to the turmoil that he was stuck in right then, to respond to the angst, to respond to the pain. And if he could respond to a pain and rise above it and not let it conquer him, then at a minimum, he could be an example to the person beside him, or an example to me right now in 2020 telling this story. That was his motivation and his purpose. It's one that if you really boil down the motivating factors of every other world philosophy out there, you get to this centralized core, this idea of there's nothing else left. There's not pain, there's not pleasure, there's not power. It's just this. It's just what Adler said. And if that is true, if people, what they're really looking for is a purpose, it's Zig. It's what Zig just said. If what the other side is offering, man, is some utopian presentation where all you have to do is just, I don't know, sit around in a hot tub all day wondering whether you should procreate or not, Dostoevsky told us that the critique of that is that you would break something just to feel something, man.
It's Nietzsche, but yes, very close.
I think
inspired by Nietzsche. Dostoevsky did repeat it for sure.
One of the things that the conservatism can offer, at least at its core, again, one more reason why I constantly pitch this idea of Judeo-Christian philosophy on here, is that at its core is a sense of altruistic motivation, that you do have a purpose. From your, how many of y'all heard this, right? In the Christian sense, from your birth, the universe creator itself has ordainedly chosen you for something specific and spectacular. That is literally the meta claim for meaning. That is like there is no other claim out there that is bigger than that as far as purpose for your life. And that underlying philosophy is what started the experiment of America. Now, once we get away from that, we get away from the true purpose and meaning, I believe. I'm not saying we necessarily have to get back to that, but something where we can give these kids, these poor kids that their brains have been rotted and diluted through Marxism. They were looking for that. They were looking for meaning and motivation and passion, and all they got was some machine that Zig's talking about. Some machine where they're just like a cog of the system and they feel like they're just a number, man. Or they're not even really a number.
That's if you're lucky.
If you're lucky, right?
If you're lucky, you get to be a cog. If not, you're just digested by the machine. I think the thing that you point out, Grant, about meaning being the highest motivating factor, I think, A, it's true. But B, the reason I think it resonates, because you're not the only person saying that. Mm-hmm. Lots of people are saying that, about that we have a crisis of meaning. I don't want to point too much at Jordan Peterson and the people who like copy him a little bit, but I think it's you did point out there that the philosopher that you're pulling from was in a gulag when he came up with that. I think it's important to point out that that's most obvious when you're feeling pain.
Yeah.
Because you don't have enough ego to be motivated by power. You've been beaten down too much.
Mm-hmm.
And because you've been beaten down so much, you can't be motivated by something as shallow as pleasure. Because pain is so much more potent, right?
Yeah.
Than pleasure. But I think there's something in there about where we're at. We're in a place where people are feeling too beat down to have an ego, to be motivated by power. And things are so at a high temperature, it's very difficult to be motivated by something as shallow as pleasure. So it's not just something that's true, because I think at the bare bottom floor of things people are motivated by, it's things that help you get over pain. Like when I talk about like who would make a good wife for somebody or a good husband or something, it's like, how are they going to help you when you're down? What is that person going to be like in a time of stress? And I think that's the same with good friends or a good job or a good community. It's what's the value when people are hurting, when they're feeling pain? Is there still something of value that can be extracted? Or maybe that's where the value really kicks in, because people are more motivated by that sense of meaning for taking care of their community. But I just wanted to throw that in there, that I mean, we're in a very real time. That's kind of what I mean. Like, we're at a time when it does feel like there's clouded meanings. You don't even know what news is true. Like supposedly the big news today. Well, I say the big news. It's not what we're talking about. But the big news in like Dumbland is the head of Israeli space program confirmed that aliens are real. Well, we don't have to get into that, but he said that we're not ready yet, though, that the Galactic Federation said that we're not ready and humans need to be eased into it. Something like that. Head of Israeli space program. But what I'm saying is, like, it's really hard to be motivated or care about something like that when you're wondering if your elections are real, and things like that. And that's not being in a gulag, but it's a certain amount of stress. Mm-hmm. There's a certain amount of stress going on right now, and in those times you can't be motivated by power. Nobody really cares about an appeal to authority, for instance, right? So it's hard to be motivated by power when you say the expert said, right? I'm experiencing pain. I don't care about your appeal to authority. I'm not motivated by power, mine or someone else's, right? Because I don't know, I'm just kind of getting into this a little bit to help people think. And as far as pleasure, we are experiencing enough stress where just experiencing pleasure is not going to motivate us, and there's nowhere to find such pleasure. You can't go out and go see a concert. You can't go out and experience some kind of culture and art. In a weird way, we're in the Dostoevsky space, in like a training ground for that. And a lot of people are afraid that we'd be into the literal Dostoevsky space, which, by the way, that's gulag space. And we might as well train now. I mean, like, if there's enough people feeling that stress where they're not motivated by those two things, think about what's meaningful for you and what provides meaning, because you're not going to be motivated by power or pleasure. You're going to be motivated by what brings you meaning. And that is like a rabbit hole trying to define what that is, but the search will also provide meaning. So it's a beautiful thing.
Kelly said in Facebook, by the way, she said, a very, very confused population is much easier to control. That's for sure. Jonathan said that he is currently doing what he believes God wants him to do. Stimpy had to leave us. Stimpy will holler at you later. Kelly said that she's currently reading Behind the Green Mask. It's really scary, this slow creep that of these plans have taken place right before our very eyes.
Fantastic book. I've interviewed the author. It's fantastic. If you want to get like a crash course in Agenda 21 theory crafting, where you're like, if you see an ordinance or something come up and then you wonder how the people were motivated to come up with such a weird thing, kind of like the single-family dwellings not being allowed.
Recode Knoxville is what she said. That makes makes way more sense now, right?
When you hear weird stuff like, so you don't want us to build houses anymore, like only apartment complexes and condos are okay. Well, it kind of go back to what Walter Williams was saying a minute ago. It's like, it's so ridiculous to make that law, because what's the priority there? Like, who cares? Like, who cares if I have a house or a condo or an apartment? I mean, that's kind of between me and the landlord, or me and the seller of the land or the property. But yeah, if you want a book about like, where did that come from? Maybe it came from some smart guy who used to work at the UN in the 70s. Rosa Corey's book, very, very good. Behind the Green Mask. Excellent.
Hey, on the way out here, Zig, by the way, anything before we change topics, if you want to jump in and let us know, man, feel free to jump in.
I don't think anybody's confused. I think the societal problem is everybody's sense of certainty. People think that they know more than what they know. And as a result, we have people who can never have any conversations because everybody already knows everything. So there's really nothing to talk about. The only thing that we can do is regurgitate Fox News or CNN, both of which are located in Washington, D.C. So this notion then that people are confused, then that might be prevalent in some areas and in some aspects of society. But I think the greater problem then that we encounter is people's sense of certainty. And they go about living life in such a dogmatic, certain way instead of experimenting and trying things out, putting forward tentative hypotheses like, oh, I think my candidate might win, or I think this should happen. Let's see if I can actually make it real. Let's see if I'm really as important as I think I am. Let's go ahead and work hard to convince others that I'm that. People don't have that experimental kind of mindset. Instead, want to get on a soapbox, which I think is very, very problematic.
Man, that aspect of again, Stein and I were just casually joking about it off air, man. The anti-fragility, right? Like trying to protect people against their own failures, man. The freedom to fail is not just like inherent within freedom itself. The freedom to fail is also what makes you a stronger person. It's not just this trial and error thing. It's like the fact that you're learning from something like that every single time.
The freedom to master failure is almost a better way of putting it. To be a good loser.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
to like lose, find value in losing, and then make it so you can be someone that people want to play with in future games.
Yeah, man. On the way out here, just because this stuff is updating so quickly, we're knocking in Georgia right now, and I'd be remiss if we didn't at least dedicate the final 5 minutes of the program just to giving you updates as to what's going on in Georgia, because goodness gracious, we are on the ground there right now. Zig's there now. Sean will be there later on this week, so on and so forth. Obviously, you know what's going on. If you didn't hear, you're about to know President Trump campaigned there on Saturday, obviously trying to urge the crowd to vote for these two Republicans, Loeffler and Perdue. I think everyone's caught up on that. If you don't know, that election is on January 5th. When's early voting? 14th, December 14th. I think
it's the 14th, and you have to be registered by 3 days from now in order to vote in the election.
Let's see here. Now, Fox News is reporting the following quote. We've talked about this in this program. We're going to be delivering a little bit here in just a second. Fox News said, quote, attorneys Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood urged Georgians not to participate in runoff vote that will determine control of the Senate in January until state officials address unsubstantiated claims. Fox News' words, unsubstantiated claims that President-elect Joe Biden won the White House through voter fraud. Powell and Wood are not working for the Trump campaign in an official capacity, but have waged legal battles on his behalf, yada, yada, so on and so forth. So, here's some of the updates we have from the left and from the right, just so you're getting a balanced perspective on what everybody says to you. Aaron Blake over at the Washington Post says this: Republicans are in damage control in the Georgia runoffs, launching an ascent effort to delegitimize Trump-aligned lawyers who have led calls for potential GOP boycotts in the January races. There are two main problems with this. One is that some top GOP figures, including Trump, have in the past very recently promoted Woods and Powell's work. The other is that Trump continues to send very mixed messages about whether Republicans should even show up to vote. Basically, what they're saying is it's difficult now for GOP members or Republicans or Trump in particular to separate themselves, the party, from Powell and Woods, when just a week or two ago, it was directly associating itself or Trump or the party or conservatism with these two.
Yeah, but it makes a lot of sense, though, because Powell was Flynn's lawyer, and Flynn just got a pardon. So in order to keep it from being on the up and up, Trump's actual lawyers, regardless of what Trump said, was like, hey, by the way, they're not with us, because that would have been a huge conflict of interest if a guy being pardoned's lawyer was also a lawyer for the president. You know, right. So, but like this guy at the Washington Post, he knows that context, and he's treating you like you're stupid. You know, like they're trying to distance. It's like, no, the actual people, the lawyers for the anyway. I can't. They always treat us like we're so dumb, Grant, and I'm so tired of it. The Washington Post guys, they're dumb for thinking I'm that dumb. Idiots.
Frida Gittes over at CNN says this: the election fraud conspiracy, to be real, would have had to enlist Attorney General Barr, Republican governors, and election officials across the country in a plan so complex that it denied victory to Trump while allowing Republicans to gain seats in the House and deprive Democrats of a majority in the Senate. In the face of death threats, Republican officials are pleading with him to cool the temperature, but Trump is shoveling more coal into that boiler. They then go on to quote some tweet that Trump sent out last week sometime talking about, hey, what did he say? Trump has now repeatedly promoted the idea that it's not worth the election of Republicans if they don't stand sufficiently behind him, like there's some kind of loyalty test going on or something like that. So look, that's a little bit of what you're getting from the left. The general idea right now is that Republicans are causing a major problem for themselves, and if they don't correct it soon, Lynn Wood and Powell could tank the entirety of the Senate runoff election. Now, I don't think that's the case, and I don't think they're
using predictive programming to set people up for when they steal votes again or add votes again. I think that's what it is. Is that just so there can be a narrative where it's like it makes sense that David Perdue lost, even though every political pundit that's worth their salt would say he's probably going to win by 4 to 5 points.
Right.
But also the disingenuousness of talking about that. I don't know, man. I could go on a rant. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to go on a rant, except to say people go vote, and to think if anybody think Donald Trump doesn't want you to go vote for David Perdue, you're stupid. Yeah. And anyone who's writing it is stupid. I mean, I'm actually going to say it, Grant. The reason Trump is putting a little bit of pressure on senators is because by some kind of Hail Mary, Doug Flutie pass, we end up with a contested election with the Electoral College being disputed. Donald Trump would need a senator and a House member to contest the Electoral College. So he'd need at least one Republican senator to say, I don't think there should be an Electoral College vote. We should vote on that. So what he's doing, basically, by putting pressure on the Georgia senators, is also putting pressure on the entire U.S. Senate. And I think he's actually in the clear there because Senator Cruz announced that if the Pennsylvania case went to the Supreme Court, or goes to the Supreme Court, what is that, tomorrow morning, by the way? Tomorrow morning, that Pennsylvania case may be heard by Judge Alito, the day of the safe harbor date. Ted Cruz has said that he will be on the Pennsylvania team and will argue in oral arguments for the for the Republicans in Pennsylvania that is suing the state of Pennsylvania. So I think he's at least got one vote there. But it's really about that, in my opinion. I don't think it's anything about trying to convince people not to vote. I think that is, Tim Pool had a good video on it, that there's people from Hollywood dressing up like Republicans, not just Lynn Wood, other people in the state. Like people who are diehard leftists dressing up like Republicans, going to these rallies with bullhorns and cowboy hats and telling people not to vote. It's a disinformation campaign. Has nothing to do with the Republican establishment or people in leadership or people running campaigns. It's a bunch of disingenuous BS. But there are Democrats who are lying and pretending to be Republicans and saying so. So I just wanted to give everyone that context and also remind them of what's coming up tomorrow morning.
That's what Eric Erickson over at Substack. I'm not too familiar with Substack, but the point remains of what he's saying. This information is valid.
Also Town Hall, the Red State also. Okay. Have you ever heard of Red State or Town Hall? So he also freelance writes. But he used to be on with, he's a major fill-in for Neil Bortz and has been for years.
Gotcha. This is what he said.
And he is a Georgia guy, by the way. He lives in Georgia. Sorry, I just wanted to add all that context.
No, that's all right. He said Wood, meaning Lynn Wood, obviously, Wood has a history of helping the Democrats. He funded John Edwards' presidential campaign. I didn't know that. He funded Barack Obama's campaign. I did know that. He funded various other Democrat Senate campaigns to help Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer. He has a variety of progressive Democrats in Georgia in both gubernatorial races and state legislative races. Wood, who did not vote for Donald Trump in the 2016 presidential election or the Georgia presidential primary, but did vote for Obama in 2008, wants to let you wants you to let the Democrats destroy the Trump legacy. He goes on to ask the question, will Georgia Republicans believe his lies or stand and fight? Now, look, I don't even personally think you need to go as far as to say that like Wood is some type of agent provocateur trying to subvert the vote. I don't even know. I don't think you need to claim sabotage to just see that you probably shouldn't be listening to this stuff. You could even just go far as to say that the last time Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood called for some outright, I don't know, ultimatum, don't vote or give us this, they got a recount from the governor. So there's already been a precedent set that the last time they called for something, they got something in return. So it could be as simple as that. It could literally just be as simple as, I don't know, man.
They also got the Georgia state legislator to ask Kemp for a special session. He ended up saying no today. Right. But I mean, and saying you should tell these people you're not going to vote unless is not the same as don't go vote.
I know.
You know, I think it's a narrative where someone said something out of anger or passion, and it's been echoed and magnified by the left as a way to come up with a narrative that Purdue could lose.
Yeah.
I really believe that. Just like the Red Mirage thing was a predictive programming to come up with a way Republicans could lose when the Democratic candidate was not campaigning at all. And then when he did, it was embarrassing. Yeah. And then coming up with a narrative that made common sense in a way, right? That Republicans could lose. That's what this is really about. I don't think this is the main message from Lynn Wood or from mostly the other one, Sidney Powell. The main message is there was fraud and you shouldn't put up with it. But the one that's being magnified is the one that has where the enemies have the most to gain. And you should always, whenever you're thinking of headlines, narratives, all that stuff in this crazy mixed up world where it's hard to know who to believe or what to believe, you should ask yourself who benefits. That's a great place to start.
Hey, look, on the way out here, too, let's do real news, fake news. I think we've covered that pretty substantially. I do hope, though, that, you know, no one on this program, myself most of all, looks back on these programs over the last couple of weeks here and thinks, man, we should have spoke more about the Lynn Wood, Sidney Powell stuff. We've done it for 3 shows in a row now. I think that's fairly sufficient. But I just want to stress one last time what Shine said from the very beginning. I don't care how you feel about the Lynn Wood stuff. I don't care how you feel about the claims of voter fraud, right? To go out there and say that you shouldn't vote to maintain the Senate is asinine. It's beyond absurd, okay? And for whatever motivating factor they're saying these things, whether they're provocateurs trying to mislead, whether they're trying to get something out of it, whether Zig's correct and they're just trying to write a book out of it. I don't care what their motivating factors is. It's dumb language, it's dumb motivation, and it's not something that should be followed. I think everyone's on the same page with that. And I feel comfortable.
Our experience on the ground shows that nobody that we've run into, I mean, we've talked to almost 10,000 different unique households. Not one person has said, well, I don't believe in elections anymore, and I'm not going to vote. Nobody did that. Everyone we talked to is either going to vote for the opponent of David Perdue, and the vast majority of them are going to vote for David Perdue. And they're excited to do it. They're going to be there on the first day of early voting with bells on. And nobody that we've talked to has said, you know what, I just don't believe in elections anymore, and I'm not going to do it. Nobody's going to do that. Even when people joke around about it because it's a way to make a point about how angry they are about this process and about the lack of transparency and the fighting of transparency. Like, hey, we just want to have our observers in there while we count. No, get out. And we're going to put big old things over the windows. It's that frustration and people like letting a little bit of steam out of that frustration. It's not because they aren't going to go vote. Nobody has said that. So, like, I also think it's just a media narrative. It's not real life. No one is not going to vote. Everyone who voted in the 5th or on the 6th of November, they're going to go vote. Unless they don't know about it or don't care or something like that. But they're not going to not vote because 2 lawyers who've been doing cases in Atlanta told them not to. I mean, we are at the point now where, like, important people can't tell regular people what to do. They're not going to listen. If they won't wear a mask, if they're not going to wear a mask, they're not going to be told to vote or not to vote. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I really believe it's predictive programming. It's a media narrative to make Democrats feel like they have a chance or to cover up some weirdness on election night, whatever. I'm just throwing that out. There could be the case. But it's not real life. That much is clear. So, like, and I'm glad we dealt with it because it's important to say you should never tell people not to vote. Just like it's important that you should never, like, offer people things to vote. It's also bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The positive inverse. But I just wanted to say that on the way out. This is not real life, you know?
I was going to say the same thing. The most important fact for me is the number of doors that we've hit on personally and across this company. That we're all, every single one of us is in Georgia. All of us. We're calling in Georgia. We're knocking on Georgia. We're texting Georgia. All we're doing is Georgia for literally since November 4th. That's all we've been doing. And to date, it's what Shine said. Today, we've not run across a single person that's like, no, I'm convinced not to vote. Now, I will say, if Republicans lose both these Senate seats, we may be having that conversation. Like, in all sincerity, if they lose both these Senate seats, whether legitimately or not, we may be at the point in society where we're going to have a full-on, full-fledged conversation of, like, Republicans just aren't going to participate anymore. But we're not there yet. They are going to show up for this one for sure. And dude, fingers crossed, seriously, fingers crossed that we are not incorrect about this. That is to say that we are correct about our assessment of, just like I'm telling you, being on the ground, seeing these people face to face, seeing their fervor, their passion. They are sold out. They're ready to go. Even the ones that are saying you don't trust the presidential election are saying, like, listen, man, we got to maintain the Senate. I'm all for it. But Zig, I got to do real news, fake news. I saw you were going to get in there just a second ago.
I did hear one guy say, well, I voted in this last election and it didn't count. And then I think during a phone call I made, I heard one guy say, I'm only voting for Trump. And then hung up.
Only voting for Joe?
Trump.
Oh, Trump. Well, look, man, I mean,
so that has happened. There are very few cases where that does indeed happen. But that has happened.
I mean, look, there are a few cases where people have. I know of.
Actually, the real last thing that I wanted to say that has nothing to do with this conversation at all. There is a Colonel Sanders Hallmark movie premiering this Sunday at 12 o'clock. Okay.
What are you talking about?
It's starring Mario Lopez, the guy from Saved by the Bell.
Are you talking about?
We watch the Hallmark in this family. Yeah. Yeah, and it's Mario Lopez.
That's awesome.
The guy from Saved by the Bell, not Zach Morris, and
the guy who hasn't aged a single day. Yeah,
and he's got that like soul glow hair, and Saved by the Bell. Now he doesn't. He's got let your soul glow, coming to America style.
Yeah, that dude, I think he's like got Benjamin Button syndrome, man. He just like stuck at 18 and then went back to 16 20 years later.
Yeah, somehow like he's like, 50 or something, and he looks younger than he did in Saved by the Bell.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, man. He swears by Epsom salt baths. Go figure. What do you know?
What are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do?
Epsom salt baths, votes, whatever. That's the way to end the show right there. Hey, it's all tying together.
Real news, fake news on the way out here. Here's the headline that you all were going to choose between. Politicians breaking their own rules can purchase hypocrisy credits. They can purchase hypocrisy credits. Let's see, 64% of y'all said fake news, 36% of y'all said real news. Drum rolling as we're getting this outro music going. That is a fake headline. That's a Babylon Bee headline. Although Eric said something at the beginning of the show that I think is right. He said something to the effect of like, I know it's a fake headline, but it may as well be real because we're right there anyways. And he's not too far off. At some point in this program, we're probably going to talk about...
It's a pilot program for carbon tax credits.
We're going to talk about social credit scores at some point, man. It's in China, slowly being introduced into Canada. It's a thing.
AOC, Bernie Sanders, and then some of the other weirdos, they talked about it in a live stream, about it affecting your insurance prices and your credit score, the stuff you say on the internet, and what candidates you support and things like that. It is already being talked about. If we have majorities in all three branches of government, at least expect the beginnings of that over the next 2 years.
Hey man, so smash the like button, give us some hearts, give us some shares. We need that social credit score to rise up, man. Trying to get a home loan with some Facebook Bitcoin currency or something.
We actually do. We have both quality, both Facebook score. Okay, we actually do all that stuff.
Hey, 9:17 on our way out this morning. My name is Mr. Henry. Zig over there, David Sean Thompson. We love each and every one of y'all. Real news, real friends. See y'all. Bye.